Profits were an improvement from I guess from the first quarter, but there was a loss because you had there was an impairment charge over $700 million. I'm just wondering whether or not I know it's very hard to predict when we get these write-downs, that sort of thing. But would you say that the worst is over when it comes to impairments?
Actually, I should start with a clarification. The impairment write-down was on the tanker division, which is not related to container shipping.
Okay.
Container shipping actually produced a profit in the second quarter of $339 million. That's quite a sizable improvement, almost $500 million improvement over the same period last year. So we're actually very delighted that the container shipping division has contributed quite positively to the group's result, and that the turnaround from quarter two last year to quarter two this year has been quite sizable. The major impact of that sits also in the contract negotiations with the customers. So during quarter one of the year, we usually renegotiate the contracts, the annual contracts with customers, and we have negotiated significant price increases for this year. So if you look at the quarter two result, you see the fruits of increasing freight rates on most of the trades. When you look at Asia, it's particularly the Europe trade, the trade with Europe that has improved considerably. It's the trade with the US that has improved considerably. And also we're seeing that the emerging markets, so Latin America, Africa, are rebounding quite importantly from their demise of the previous years. And we're seeing that they're buying more goods from Asia again. So actually we're seeing across the board improvement in terms of demand and improvement in terms of the revenues.
And across those routes, are you still increasing capacity? Are your vessels full at the moment?
The vessels are full. We've also not added a lot of capacity this year, and that you've actually seen in the industry as a whole. So if you look at the supply-demand imbalance in 2017, it's been quite healthy, much more healthy than it was in the previous year. If you look at the total order book also of the industry, so the number of new ships that are on order to add to the existing fleet globally, you're talking to the tune of 13% for the industry overall. And in our particular case, we have about just under 10% of our total fleet on order at the moment. So that's actually a fairly low number, and it also suggests that people are a lot smarter in optimizing the capacity that they have and using it for the best possible way to cover demand.
And this increase in the pipeline that's coming online in terms of capacity, you're not worried at all at this point that we're not going to overshoot, that the market demand can absorb this over the next few quarters?
Certainly in quarter two, we've seen a very healthy supply-demand imbalance, or balance rather. In quarter three, we are very confident as well in quarter four. So for this year, which is the horizon that we're talking about, we see a very healthy demand development, and the capacity is sufficient to carry it, but there's not a lot of overcapacity at the moment.
When it comes to consolidation, we've seen a fair amount, your company as well as your competitors here. Do you think we're past peak activity, or do you see this continuing?
Well, I will start by saying that in the last 2 years, we've seen more M&A activity and more consolidation in our industry than we've seen in the past 10. Right. So that's a very good sign, and it was actually long overdue. We've been talking consolidation in this industry.
Because it was very fragmented 2015, 2016.
It was very fragmented historically. So we've seen a lot of players that are either bought by others or joining alliances. And we actually think that there is more room for that still. There are still some really small players out there that should probably join alliances and or seek M&A activity.
Fewer big players, theoretically speaking, of course, lead to higher freight rates. What are your assumptions moving forward in terms of how they bake into your projections, in terms of the increase of freight rates, I guess, this quarter and next?
No matter how many players there are globally, every player needs to be competitive. And the consortia that most of these players operate in, there's about 3 large alliances that are left in the industry. And we're seeing still that even with 3 alliances, you need to be competitive at all times. You need to have good prices at all times. So I'm not worried that the competition is going to disappear. The competition will continue to be very strong between those alliances and within those alliances even, because each of these carriers are independent commercially. They just operate in like a code-share arrangement. So I'm not worried. In fact, it pushes us to keep improving products. It pushes us to keep meeting demands of customers in a better and better way, because the benchmark of the competition is increasing quite considerably.
We got to talk about the impact of the cyber attack. 200-300 million is the estimate at the moment. Is that the high number, 300? There's no chance it's going to go higher?
With what we know now, that's the estimate.
Are you fully back online?
We're fully back online. Our systems are back on. The way we deal with customers is back on. Of course, there are a few boxes or a few containers that were routed wrongly in the period that it happened. We are rerouting those boxes to make sure they had to go to the final destinations. But all the systems are back on. We've, of course, upgraded all the patches that we have in place to protect us against a new potential cyber attack. So we're confident that we're secure.
And another thing I want to ask you about is, come 2020, there's a sulfur cap that's going to be put in place. How much high sulfur oil do you use now? Fuel do you use now? And what percentage of the total are you looking to bring that down to low sulfur?
I don't have the exact number with me, but of course, the important part with all these legislations is that they are enforced globally by governments to make sure that all the players play by the same rules. We are usually at the forefront of these things.
You've been very vocal about.
And in Hong Kong specifically, we were actually being at the forefront as well, trying to take the lead. But it's important that all the carriers play by the same rules, because you can't allow this to be a competitive advantage or disadvantage depending on how compliant you are. We are usually at the forefront of compliance, and we are usually the first ones to buy into these policies and to deal with governments on this.
And you're looking to install something called scrubbers into all your vessels.
Yeah, scrubbers are fairly expensive in terms of the installation and the maintenance particularly, so we would rather focus on having the right fuel, so we don't need to use the scrubbers rather than installing scrubbers every year. We do have scrubbers on many ships.
Is it either or? Do you do scrubbers or you don't? Scrubbers or do you adjust your fuel composition?
Ideally, we would rather adjust the fuel composition than deal with the scrubbers, because the maintenance is quite substantial on them.
Do you have a ballpark? I know it's just a projection at the moment. The ballpark cost of how much that would be?
I wouldn't have that right now, but the ballpark of the low fuel sulfur the low sulfur fuel is around $2 billion just for us.
Since we're talking about oil prices have remained generally, the energy prices have remained generally range bound. Are you hedged? Are you looking to hedge? What's your thinking on that at the moment?
Internally, we produce oil and we consume oil, so we have a natural hedge within the group at the moment. We don't usually go out and hedge fuel on the markets. And
very quickly, when you look at the broader industry, it has certainly improved. If you had to pick one route, east-west, north-south, which one has really seen a pickup in activity?
Commercially, I would say that the biggest improvement in terms of the rates has been Asia-Europe.